This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, going Rabbi Parshas boy. Moshe Rabbeinu has his encounter with Paroi. Vayomer lo Paroi leich me'alei. Parshas, get out of here. Hishamer lecha, watch out. Al toisef ra'os panai. Do not look at my face again. Ki biyoyim ra'oscha fanai tamos. The day you see my face, you're going to die. Paroi says, I don't want to catch you looking at my face anymore. The question is, what's Moshe Rabbeinu doing looking at the face of Paroi? You're not to look at the face of a Rasha. Gemara says, why would Paro have to tell Moshe, don't look at my face? What's Moshe Rabbeinu doing looking at the face of Paroi? And what does Moshe say? Vayomer Moshe, kein dibarta. Good gesagt. I'm not going to look at your face anymore.
Don't worry.
Says Rashi, kein dibarta. Yafeh dibarta. You spoke well. Uvizmanoi dibarta. You spoke at the right time. You're right, I'm not going to look at your face anymore. What is this emphasis that Rashi is placing and the Pasuk is placing on the fact that Moshe is saying to her, you know what? Good gazak, I'm not going to look at your face. And it's at the right time. You're saying it, Dvarim B'itai. You're saying at the right time, I'm not going to look at your face. Like Paroi is saying well-placed words. Paroi is saying something very integral and very important, that at this juncture, Moshe Rabbeinu is saying, you know what, Paroi, you're saying very good. At this point in time, Yafeh dibarta, Bizmanoi dibarta. What exactly is Paroi saying to Moshe Rabbeinu, and why is Moshe Rabbeinu giving him such a ringing endorsement to what he's saying? And, B'chlal, we know that the pasuk says, "Vayofos avatzek asher hotziu mi Mitzrayim ugos matzos." They baked the dough that they took out of Mitzrayim, the matzah cakes, ki loy chametz, ki garshu mi Mitzrayim. They were chased out of Mitzrayim. V'lo yachlu lehismameya. They could not delay. V'gam tzedel lo yasu lahem. They had no provisions. So the pasuk is saying that they were basically kicked out of Mitzrayim. And we know the Arizal teaches us, and the Rambam has a similar expression, that Klal Yisrael stayed into Mitzrayim until the last possible moment. They were at the brink of falling to the 50th level of Tumah. Had they fallen to the 50th level of Tumah, the Arizal identifies that as the point of no return. So in other words, how long did Klal Yisrael stay in Mitzrayim? Until the last moment that it was humanly possible to stay. Had they stayed there one extra moment, they would have fallen to the point of no return. Rebbeinu Shalom, come on, I mean, if someone has a plane to catch, what do you do? When do you arrive? You arrive, 2 hours before. This way you could check in calmly, security. You could take off your shoes. They could make you take off everything they want.
I don't have to anymore.
And you could arrive on the plane with ample time so you can have a comfortable trip. Why is the Rebbeinu Shalom making it that they stay until the last possible moment and then all of a sudden they have to run out? I mean, everything the Rebbeinu Shalom is doing for Klal Yisrael is tremendous chesed. In the Midbar, they had Anani Akavod, they had the Man, they had the Be'er. Why is the Rebbeinu Shalom harassing them that to have them stay until the last possible second, and then they have to run out like a chicken without a head? Let them leave an hour early, a day early. Why do they mamish have to, stick it in the face? Rebbeinu Shalom has them stay until the last second, and then they run out. Give them some time. Let them leave like normal human beings. What's the inyan of that? Look at number 5. Vayomer Moshe el ha'am al tiro. Moshe says to people, don't be afraid. Hisyatzvu, stand. U'ra'u es yeshuas Hashem, and see the salvation of Hashem asher yaseh lachem hayom, that He's doing for you today. Ki asher re'isem es Mitzrayim hayom. You see Egypt today. Lo yisoisifu l'roisam oid ad oilam. Never look at them again. So not only is there an Isser to return to Mitzrayim, the Pasuk is saying, don't look at Mitzrayim again. Why not? Why can't they look at Mitzrayim again? What is the emphasis? The Pasuk says in Parsha Shemais, V'nitzaltem es Mitzrayim. V'nitzaltem es Mitzrayim. What does that mean, V'nitzaltem es Mitzrayim? V'nitzaltem es Mitzrayim. So the Targum says, Usaroy kinun, empty out. What exactly are they emptying out Mitzrayim from? They took a lot of money, they took the clothing, the pasuk says, Lo Sishar Parsa, they took the animals. But why the emphasis on emptying out Mitzrayim? In fact, the Baal HaTurim points out, B'nitzaltem, B'gematria, K'metzula she'ein ba'dagim, like a pond that has no fish. What is the significance of this complete emptying out of Mitzrayim like a pond that has no fish? Now, throughout Shas, we find that the Amoraim, aside from being Gedolei Olam, but they were very fearful people. They were awesome personalities, to the point where you didn't want to mess with them, right? The Gemara says Rabbi Yochanan had long eyelashes, and if he would lift up those eyelashes and give a person an eye, and look at a person in a way that Rabbi Yochanan wasn't pleased, the person would drop dead. Right? Many, many examples where Amoraim gave a look at the Talmud or at another Rav, and the person dropped dead immediately. The lashon of the Gemara is, let's say, for example, in Brachas, Daf Nun Ches, V'iked Amri, Rav Sheishes Nasan Einav Boy, V'nase Gal Shalat Samais. Rav Sheishes looked at someone, and he became a pile of bones. What's the inyan? What's going on? Rav Sheishes looked at somebody, and he became a pile of bones? How did that happen? Rav Sheishes, I thought, Rav Sheishes, what?
Didn't see.
Apparently not. He's Nasan Einav V'nasa Gal Shalat Samais. So what does this mean? Rav Sheishes looked at somebody and they became a pile of bones? Well, what's that process? What is this procedure where an Amoira could look at someone and they turn into a pile of bones? So Rabbi say, this morning we're going to learn a concept which is found in all the Sifrei Machshava. It's going to be found primarily in the writings of the Chasam Sofer, in many, many, many places. Chasam Sofer mentions this idea at least in 6 places we have on the sheet today. This idea Chasam Sofer mentions many, many times. By his own admission, he says he mentions it many times. It's an idea he heard from both of his Rabbeim. Sai, Rav Nosson Adler. Rav Nosson Adler was Chasam Sofer's Rebbe Muvak. Nosson Adler lived from 1741 to 1800. He was a tremendous makubal, but not necessarily a popular pulpit rabbi. Far from it. He was chased out of many communities. But Chasam Sofer considered Nosson Adler as Rebbe Muvak, and this is an idea that he mentions many times from his other Rebbe, Reb Pinchas Harwitz, the Panim Yafais, the Hafla, the Hamakneh. So this is an idea that Chasam Sofer heard from both of his Rabbeim. The Hafla probably heard it from his Rebbe, from the early Talmidim of the Baal Shem Tov, and it's an idea that's found throughout the writings of the Or HaChaim HaKadosh, and that is, to begin with, the beginning of the introduction is that for anything in this world to exist, whether it's a human being or even an inanimate object, it could be a table, it could be a building, it could be a chair, everything has to have some type of spark of Kedusha, a nitzutz of Kedusha. If something did not have a spark of Kedusha, it would not be able to exist. It would dissipate, it would disintegrate. Everything in this world has some type of life force. And that life force is an element of Kedusha. Even the biggest Rasha in the world has to have some spark of Kedusha. If he didn't have a spark of Kedusha, he could not be, he could not exist. He would immediately disintegrate. Or HaChaim HaKadosh writes in Parshas Bereshis, Parak Aleph Pasuk Chaf Beis, number 9 on your sheets, he says, Hine yadua hu ki b'amnosenu harabim harbe nitzotzos shel kedusha hutba'u b'toich haklipos. Many sparks of kedusha have been trapped in the forces of impurity, and they're all mixed together. And then he says on the 4th line, V'hine yadua ki haklipa chiyusa hi yinikasa me'akdusha. Even the klipa. What's a klipa? Literally the shell, the forces of impurity. Its nourishment comes from the spark of kedusha. V'zula zeh ein la chiyus. Without the spark of kedusha, tuma would have no vitality. So that is the concept. The concept is that even for tuma to exist, even tuma nourishes itself from kedusha. Even the biggest rasha, you name him. Think of the biggest rasha you could imagine. Even he, someone who we don't even want to mention their name, has some type of spark of kedusha. Without that spark, he cannot exist. Or HaChaim HaKadosh writes in Parshas Vayechi, this is probably the most fundamental Or HaChaim HaKadosh in the entire Chumash. Our Chaim HaKadosh, Reb Chaim ben Attar, ben Moshe Attar, he was born in Morocco in 1696. He also wandered until finally he settled in Yerushalayim in 1743. At the age of 46 years old, he lived in Eretz Yisrael for only 1 or 2 years, and then he was nifter very young at the age of 47. Or Chaim HaKadosh. He wrote on Shas, Chefetz Hashem, he wrote on Halacha, Pri Tayar, but he's most well known for the Or Chaim HaKadosh. So he writes a very important yesod. Look at number 10. Achein yizbaru haksuvim al pi hakdama achas. These psukim could be explained with the following introduction, and he writes very poetically, Hakdama achas zaka ubara, pure and clear. Asher he'ira einenu b'dvarim nechmadim me'ar tarasenu, that our eyes have been illuminated from the light of our Torah. V'hu, and that is, Ki adam harishain hu ilan shevai hayotluyim kol haneshama shel hakdusha. Adam harishain was the tree that all the holy souls hung on. Sheyatzu la'olam, that went out to this world, miyayim hayos olam va'ashar asidim latzis. In other words, if you could imagine the neshama of Adam Arishain's neshama contained in it all future holy neshamas. But says Ar Chaim HaKadosh, Uchshechata Adam, when Adam Arishan sinned, Shalad Chilek Hara, the forces of evil were rampant, Vayish Mimenu Shevi, and they took not a Chevy, not a car, they took a captive. Le'in Mitzrayim. In other words, when Adam Rishon sinned and he ate from the Eitz Hadas, the forces of Tumah captured and kidnapped many holy neshamas. Many holy neshamas were then kidnapped by the forces of Tumah. And says Or Chaim HaKadosh, V'darshu me'al sefer anshe emes, and it is incumbent upon the men of truth, and it is the task of the men of truth to relinquish and to free these holy souls. Say, Rabbi, what are you talking about? I don't know. This is what Ar Chaim HaKadosh says. That when Adam Arishain sinned, many of the holy neshamas were captured, were kidnapped, and it is the job of tzaddikim to free these kidnapped neshamas. So, for example, from the time that our nation began, it has been our obligation to release these neshamas. Now, how do you release a captured neshama? Well, sometimes when a tzaddik or a tzaddikes has, says Ar Chaim HaKadosh, when they're mizdabek to this neshama that was captured, they relinquish and they release these neshamas. What do we mean to be mizdabek? Says Ar Chaim HaKadosh, for example, when Dinah Bas Yaakov had relations with Shechem, that is a way of freeing a holy neshama. Now, which holy neshama was in Shechem? The holy neshama of Chanina ben Tradian. Says Ar Chaim HaKadosh, that's Merumas in the pasuk. V'hinei rachavas yadayim. The neshama of Rabbi Chanina ben Tradian was kidnapped in Shechem. When Dinah lived with Shechem, she freed Rabbi Chanina ben Tradian. Or he says furthermore, sometimes the neshama that is kidnapped will be relinquished on its own. Well, says Ar Chaim HaKadosh, the Gemara in Saita has an expression, Ikfisa de Mashiach. What does Ikfisa de Mashiach mean? The heels of Mashiach. Why is it called the heels of Mashiach? Because as time progresses, the caliber of neshamas that we're able to relinquish from the forces of Tumah diminishes. In other words, what we're able to relinquish today is on a much lesser level than in the beginning of days. So, for example, the beginning of time, there were very big neshamas that were kidnapped. Says Ar Chaim HaKadosh. Abraham that were released. Who were they? Abraham Avinu, Rosh HaGerim, Sarah Imenu, the head of the Gerim. They were the holiest neshamas, and they were relinquished in the beginning of time. And following then, says Ar Chaim HaKadosh, turning over, they were released. Following them, you had Rus HaMoyaviyah, and then later on Shmaya and Naftalion, and then Unclus Hager. But as the generations continue, the caliber of what we're able to free from the Kochas HaTumah diminishes.
How are these Israelites freed?
How are they freed? So far we learned either through some type of relations, but now we're going to learn another method. Says Rav Gedalia Yashar in the Ar Gedalia on Shavuos, and this is an idea that Rav Gedalia Yashar mentions many times throughout his writings, that he quotes another Ar Chaim HaKadosh, and that is, there are many ways to try to pick up these lost neshamas. Number one, Galus. When Klal Yisrael is scattered to all ends of the world, by us being in different parts of the world, we're able to, so to speak, go around to the different countries in the world where these neshamas were scattered and pick up the lost neshamas and the lost sparks of Kedusha. That's the inyan of Galus. Why? Because as Klal Yisrael goes to America, we pick up Gerim in America. We go to Europe, we pick up Gerim in Europe. We go to different countries, we pick up other Gerim. So Ar Chaim HaKadosh asks, but if Klal Yisrael was on a high enough level, we wouldn't have to go into Galus. So if we wouldn't have to go into Galus, how would we have picked up all of those Nitzaytis of Kedusha that's scattered throughout the world? Says Ar Chaim HaKadosh, very simple. If Klal Yisrael wouldn't have had to go into Galus, we would have been on a much higher level. We would have been able to pick up these sparks of Kedusha through a process called magnetic force. That through our limud Torah, through our tefillah, through our mitzvahs, that we would have drawn the gerim to us. Like the pasuk says, Eilecha kol goyim yavoyu me'af se'aretz. In other words, if we would have been on a high enough level, we would have just been stationed in Yerushalayim, and all the gerim would have come to us, like in the beginning of time, when Hashem gave the Torah to Klal Yisrael. Yisro came to us. We didn't go to Yisro. Yisro came to us. How did Yisro come to us? Vayishma Yisro. He was drawn to us like a magnetic force. But because Klal Yisrael descended, and our force of Kedusha is not as potent, so now we have to be scattered to all ends of the world in order to pick up the gerim. Chasam Sofer, and by the way, the Rabbi Shiur says an amazing thing. He says, you ever wonder, a very astute historical observation, that the verdict of history is that wherever Klal Yisrael goes in Galus, we go to a certain country, and we establish ourselves, and we're successful, and we reach the pinnacle of success, and then one night, we're out of there. With no warning. People think, oh, America, it's comfortable, it'll never happen. Obviously, people never studied history. There has been no country in the history of planet Earth that the Jewish people were not kicked out of. No, none. Zero. And the way it goes is, we reach the pinnacle of success, and then overnight we're out. There's no progression. There's no warning signs. Overnight, every single country. Why does it work like that? Says Rav Gedalia Shiur. Very simple.
Who says this?
Rav Gedalia Shiur. Says Rav Gedalia Shiur, we come to a country, our avodah is to pick up the Nitzayis Shel Kedusha. That's why we're scattered to this continent, to that continent, to this country, to that. Once we've finished in a country, business is over. There's nothing more to do. All right, we're out of there. We have no tachlis there. We have no purpose there. That's his observation of Jewish history. Well, Chasam Sofer tells us in Parshas Bahaloischa that he has a Kabbalah. Take a look on the 6th line. Kabalti mimari v'Rabbi Hagoyin HaChasid Marenu Rav Nosson Adler Kohen Tzedek. Lefamim HaKadosh Baruch Hu Mazmin L'Tzadik Al Yedei Sibois Rabbois. Very often the Rebbeinu Shalom leads a tzaddik and prepares for a tzaddik through various circuitous routes. Sheyaver Derech Ploini, that you should go to such and such place. Why? You ever wonder? Sometimes tzaddikim, they end up one day in some far darban a place. Who knows why? Why are they there? Why do you get lost and you have to take some kind of discombobulated route to where you're going? What's the inyan of that? The answer is Kedei Sheyavar Lefnei Ilan Pliny. Sometimes the Rebbeinu Shalom wants a tzaddik to pass by a certain tree, a har Pliny, or a certain mountain. Kedei Lesakin Ba'avrei Derech Sham Nitzoitzim Hamagugalim Sham. Because you don't know, there could be a rock there. There's some kind of kedusha in the rock, in the piece of dirt, in the tree, in the leaf, in the blade of grass. You have no idea why you need it to be there, but you need it to be there. You need it to be there to say a bracha. You need it to be there to have a hira tshuva. Something, you had a certain avoid over there. The Rebbeinu Shalom knew that there's some spark of kedusha that has not been freed, and that is why he led you on that path. You could go to a certain place every day and take the same road. You say, Rebbeinu Shalom, why did I make a left turn today? Never happened to you? Of course. What? Oh, he doesn't drive. But if you drive, sometimes.
That's a good answer.
Sometimes, you usually sit in a certain seat in the shul. One day, I sat in the wrong seat. There's a crumb on the seat. You need to be masakein, the spark of kedusha in that crumb. A guy ate a cookie the day before, in the cookie. That's what Rav Nosson Adler told Chasam Sofer. there are certain nitzotzos shel kedusha in various places that are the cheshbonos of the Borei Olam that somehow the tzaddik needed to be misake. Well, the entire purpose of going down to Mitzrayim is that many of these nitzotzos hakadusha, many of these neshamos, ended up somehow in Mitzrayim. That's where they ended up. The Erev Rav, many neshamos. In fact, the Hafla, the Rabbi the Chasam Sofer writes that, as we learned before, all the neshamas were originally in Adam Arisha, and then when he sinned with the Eitz Hadas, the neshamas were captured. Well, says the Panim Yafais, well, the Eitz Hadas is called the Eitz Hadas. We know why did we go down to Mitzrayim? One of the reasons was because Avram Avinu said, Bama Eda, a lashon of das. Also, he reawakened the Ched of the Eitz Hadas. Well, says the Hafla, that's why the Rebbeinu Shalom tells Moshe Rabbeinu, Yadoya Teda. Yadoya Teda. 2 dases. One is for the Eitz Hadas and one is for the Bama Eda. Somehow in Mitzrayim, all of these neshamas were relinquished and they were being held captive in the Ervas Haaretz. In fact, the Hafla writes that Klal Yisrael left Mitzrayim bir Chush Gadol. The Gematria of Rechush Gadol, says the Hafla, together with the Ayin Nefesh that went down to Mitzrayim, is the same as Eitz Hadas. In other words, the purpose of going down to Mitzrayim is to free and to retake and to reconquer all the neshamas that went lost by the Ched of Adam Arisha. In fact, if you look at number 15, the Panim Yafar Rabbi, everything we're learning today is at least in 6 Mekayimos in the writings of the Chasam Sofer, and in many places in the Panim Yafais, the Rabbi the Chasam Sofer, and this is a very well-documented, well-established idea, b'machshava, the concept of the sparks of Kedusha that needed to be retaken when Klal Yisrael left Mitzrayim. Well, says the Panim Yafais, we know Klal Yisrael left Mitzrayim b'Rechush Gadol, and yet the pasuk says in Shir Hashirim, Toirei zahav naselach im nikudais hakasef, from which Chazal derive Gadol hoisa bizas hayam yoser mi bizas Mitzrayim. Greater were the spoils that we took from the sea than the spoils that we took out of Mitzrayim. Well, the Hafla understands it in this vein as well, that as many neshamos and as many nitzotzos that we were able to take out of Mitzrayim, we were able to really capture and accomplish much more al hayam, even more than we took out of Mitzrayim. The Rabbi Yishar adds in Parsha Shemais that originally when we were in Mitzrayim, we were all where? Be'eretz Goshen. So how did it happen that we got scattered all over Mitzrayim? So that Rabbi Yishar explains that was the purpose of the Gzeira. Teven, loisoi sifon loseis teven la'am. Don't give them any more straw. Now that they don't have straw, they have to go out and gather all the straw. Well, okay, so we know what Paroi was thinking, but why did the Rebbeinu Shalom want that to happen? Because the Rebbeinu Shalom wanted to speed up the amount of time we would have to be in Mitzrayim. That could only be accomplished if it wasn't being successful just sitting there in Goshen and having the Kedusha being attracted to them, so they had to go out and gather whatever sparks that were available throughout the land of Mitzrayim. So comes the Chasam Sofer, at least in 2 Mekayimos. He says this in Parshas Balak. He says this in a Sefer called Chasam Sofer HaChadash, on this week's Parsha. He says, Dvarim Noiraim. On the Pasuk in Parshas Balak, that Bilam tells Balak, L'cha iatzcha, ma'yasa amazeh bi'acharis hayamim. Let me advise you what this nation is going to do at the end of days. Chazal derived from there that Bilam gave Balak the Eitzah to have the Benois Mayav be mezaneh with Klal Yisrael. So the Chasam Sofer is matmiya. Where in the world do we see in this pasuk that Bilam is telling Balak the idea of having the Benois Mayav be mezaneh with Klal Yisrael? He says, "L'cha iatzcha ma'yasa am hazeh bi'achris hayamim." I'm going to tell you what's going to be in the end of days. The answer is, says the Chasam Sofer, Bilam was a very smart man. Bilam knew that everything in this world only has a life force through a spark of Kedusha. and he knew that Moav only existed through the spark of Kedusha that it had. What was that? Rus. In fact, once Rus was born, you never hear of Moav again. Moav disappeared. It disintegrated. Tayu vavayu. Why? Because its life force was Rus. Once Rus comes out of Moav, once we take Rus back to us, Moav has no kayach to exist. It has no neshama. It has no life force. So Bilam strokes his beard, if he had one, and he says, I have a great plan. I know these Jewish people, they're coming to take Rus. We can't avoid it. There's no way to avoid our destruction. Because Rus is going there. The only thing we could do is delay. When the inevitable happens, delay. If we get our daughters to be mezana with Klal Yisrael, we will then capture so many more Nitzotzot Shel Kedusha, it will take them another 400 years to extract it all. So by having this hisdabkus between our nation and their nation, it will delay the process of removing the last spark of Kedusha. Well, says the Chasam Sofer, look at number 18, and he says this as well in number 19. He says on the pasuk, he quotes the Kisvei Arizal, look at number 18. Kisa asein haaretz, v'hu yosef mimuli yesh lefarish, t'isa v'kisvei Arizal, v'yalakid Yosef es kol ha'kesef. Yosef gathered es kol ha'kesef. Es is bala rabbis, not only the kesef, but what comes along with the kesef. That there was so many sparks of Kedusha trapped in Mitzrayim, that Yosef said the only way to get it out is, I'm going to have to take it, there are sparks of Kedusha in their money. That's why Yosef had to gather every single penny of Mitzrayim to be able to make Mitzrayim kimitzula she'ein b'idagim. He had to remove every vestige of Kedusha. That's why he gathered all the kesef and all the mikneh, and he bought the Mitzrayim. That's what it means. Yatsu kol tzivos Hashem me'eretz Mitzrayim. That's pshat in Makas Choshech. Makas Choshech, the pshat is, every vestige of Or that was in Mitzrayim was removed. But B'vnei Yisrael haya Or b'mayshvosam. They were nis'aleh by removing every drop of Kedusha. Well, says the Chasam Sofer, look at number 19. This is in a sefer called Chasam Sofer HaChadash. The new Chasam Sofer. On the third line, Yesh Chakira Ketana, number 19. Ugadoy Lahima'id. I have a very big question here. Doesn't the Gemara in Megillah say, Asr L'Histaka B'fnei Rasha? You're not going to look at a Rasha. It's well known when the Chazon Ish, when a meeting was arranged between him and one of the early, he would not look at him. Why? Asr L'Histaka B'fnei Rasha. So what's Moshe Rabbeinu doing? Para, he's looking at him every time. He's looking at him. Para said, stop looking at me. Even Para couldn't take it anymore. Para said, don't look at me anymore. What's Moshe Rabbeinu doing looking at him? Did Moshe Rabbeinu know the Chazon Ish? If Chazon Ish didn't look, why is Moshe Rabbeinu looking? And then Para said, enough looking. What are you staring at? I have something on my nose? Says the Chasam Sofer, Yesh v'yesh. Sometimes you can't look at a Rasha, and sometimes big tzaddikim have a big avodah looking at Rasha. What is that? Says the Chasam Sofer, this concept, that everything in this world, for it to exist, must have a nitzutz of Kedusha, must have a life force of Kedusha. Now in general, the Rasha is so overwhelmed with Tumah that to look at him would be an experience of intake of Tumah. But the tzaddik, his Kedusha is so powerful that when he looks at the Rasha, he's able to vacuum out whatever shirayim of Kedusha is stuck in the Rasha. In other words, when a tzaddik looks at a Rasha, the tzaddik actually has an elevating experience. Because, look, if the Rasha is walking and talking, obviously he has some spark of Kedusha, the tzaddik is able to take it to himself. Like, says the Chasam Sofer, the analogy is that if you have two fires, if you ever took a candle and you put the candle near a big fire, what will the candle do? The candle will jump to the big fire. So laws of physics. You can try it at home. Or even two candles with proper smoke detectors and so forth. You have to take two candles. You put them near each other, they connect. Especially if you have a small fire and a big fire, the small fire will literally jump to the big fire. Well, it's the same thing with Kedusha. The neshama of the tzaddik is such a powerful fire. That's the concept of Devekus to Hashem. The Malbim writes, the concept of Devekus to Hashem is Rebbeinu Hashem is the Eish Hagadolah. He's the Eish Oichala. And the neshama is Ner Elokim Nishmas Adam. When a person places himself merely in closer proximity to the Rebbeinu Hashem, the neshama is agitated to connect to the greater fire. The Eish Shal HaVesya. The great fire of God. When Moshe Rabbeinu would look at Parai, every time he would look at Parai, he would chap a little bit more Kedusha out of Parai. By Makas Dam, he took a little bit. By Makas Fardeh, he took a little bit. By Makas Kinim, alright, he kept on taking out of Parai until Parai was mamish a goyseis bekedusha. By the time he got up to the last Makkah, Parai was like teetering to the Olam Ha'emes already in Kedusha. There's almost nothing left. So when Parai tells Moshe Rabbeinu, stop looking at me, Moshe Rabbeinu said, good gesagt. I'm not going to be looking at you anymore. Because there's nothing more to get from you. You're mamish or goises bekedusha. Vayomer Moshe kain dibarta. You're speaking good. Says Rashi, Yafeh dibarta. You're speaking good. Bizmanoi dibarta. You're speaking at the right time. Emesh lo yosef I have nothing to look at you for. Then taka, after I look at you now, it's going to be like the Chazon Ish. There's nothing to look at. But in the first 9 times, Moshe Rabbeinu was on the Madrega to take out a little bit more Kedusha out of Parai. Because even Parai has some nitzvahs of Kedusha.
Why would our mission be to inject Kedusha? Why would it be to hoard the Kedusha?
Why are we trying to take the Kedusha out of Parai?
Why isn't our mission to inject Kedusha?
Our mission.
Into the Goyim, into the...
As opposed to...
It's a good question.
I don't know.
Good question.
The purpose of the Galos is to retrieve what rightfully belongs. In other words, the concept that Adam Arishon had, all the neshamas in him, really, it's brought down, it means he had all the neshamas of Klal Yisrael, not the nations of the world. Even though you say Adam Arishon was the first man, so included in him should have been all of mankind. No. Why? Because Atem Nikram Adam, V'Oivekam Loi Nikram Adam. In other words, only we connect back to Adam Arishon. Even though you say, what do you mean? Isn't Adam Arishon the father of all mankind? No, he's the father of Adam. And at Matan Torah, Klal Yisrael was worthy to the title Adam. So we're not trying to change from the way God created the world. The way God created the world was Adam Arishon had a certain amount of Kedusha. And what we're trying to do is merely bring the world back to the way the Bari Olam wanted it to be originally. How do we do that? By taking back by taking back the Kedusha that spread to the rest of the world. Why doesn't the Rebbeinu Hashem want us to add Kedusha to those who never had it? Kachi Gzera Milafana. That's how God decreed it. Okay, so Rabbi Isai, the Chasam Sofer says that once Moshe Rabbeinu stood before Parai this final time, Moshe Rabbeinu was maskim to Parai, you're right, there's really nothing left to be here for. I'm maskim to you. Yafeh dibarta, bizmanoi dibarta. I will not ever again see your face. Says the Chasam Sofer, this is Pshat. In the Mamori Chazal, Rav Sheshes will look at somebody and they became Gal Shalat Samais. What's Pshat? You find throughout Shas. And Amorah looked at someone and they became a pile of bones. Why? Rav Sheshes would look at someone, his histaklos would draw forth whatever vestige and life force of Kedusha the person had. Mamela, it then was vacuumed out to Rav Sheshes the way the Archaim HaKadosh says that had we have been on the highest Madrega, we wouldn't have to go out and retrieve. It would have been drawn to us. Well, these Amorim were on such a level. And just like Moshe says, I can no longer look at you. Well, Rav Sheshes, what these Amorim would sometimes do is, when they looked at somebody, they drew forth whatever nitzvahs of Kedusha there was, and Mamela, the person turned into a Gal Shalat Samais. They had no life force, they had no vitality anymore. Says Chasam Sofer, this idea, look at number 19, right before number 20, about 10 lines up. Says Says of Chasam Sofer that what we're learning today is such a fundamental idea, is such an important piece of information, is such an important idea. He says, "V'hadavar hazeh hu chakira gedola." This is a very important analysis. V'hagamshi ketana be'enei mi she'eino moed b'kedushas hatzadikim. Someone who does not believe in the sanctity of a tzaddik will not value what we're learning. Avo gedola hi be'enai. But says of Chasam Sofer, to me, this is a very valuable yediyah. You could understand many things in this world by the concept of tzaddikim being able to remove kedusha from what they encounter. Mi sheyesh lo einayim lira, someone who has the ability to see. So far, this idea is well documented in the writings of the Chasam Sofer, in the Orach Chaim HaKadosh, in the Panim Yafos. Rabbi Sai, Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz. Okay, and listen to how he says it. Amazing. Says Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz, sometimes girush, sometimes exile for the Jewish people is beneficial. Now look at this. Look in the second paragraph. Okay, this is in the Yaros Devash number 20. It's an amazing thing. V'zehu hadavar asher amarti b'reiyas pnei rasha. This is the idea that I mentioned by looking at the rasha. Ki lefa'amim tzadik mabit b'rasha. Sometimes the tzaddik looks at the rasha. Ki yesh b'fanav nitzutze kedusha. On the face of the rasha are sparks of kedusha. Uchshehat tzadik mabit b'y. When the tzaddik looks at the rasha, oz hakdusha mamshicha kedusha kenoida. Kedusha draws kedusha. Kol min leminai. Right? They say in the world, opposites attract. So you know it's just the opposite, right? Because whatever the world thinks is the exact opposite of the truth. It's min leminai. Oz moishech hakdusha min harashal atzmai. That's the pshat when Yaakov says to Esav, Ra'ois panecha karois pnei Elokim. Oh, looking at your face like looking at God. What? He's looking at a Hitler. He's looking at Esav. What are you looking at your face? No, Yaakov was makir that in Esav's face are sparks of kedusha. Yaakov said it's been a pleasure doing business. Right? In other words, when a tzaddik deals with the rasha, the tzaddik basically hoards, like you put it. He takes whatever kedusha the rasha has and he takes it for himself. What's pshat in Esav? Kitzayid bepiv. There was what to trap on his mouth. Kitzayid bepiv. All the kedusha was in his mouth. So Yaakov made it his business to get a good look at the face of Esav. That's the pshat why the head of Esav was in the Ma'aras HaMachpelah. Because all of his kedusha, all of his sparks of kedusha was in his head. Was kitzayid bepiv. That's why his head was buried in the Ma'aras HaMachpelah. Says Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz toward the end, the exact same thing we're saying from the Chasam Sofer. V'chein b'Moshe, shaya mabit b'Paroi. Moshe looked at Paroi, haya gamkein l'kabel menen in tzutzei kedusha. Aval levasoif kishen nishlam alikot nitzoitzos. But in the end, when all the sparks were gathered, haya asur l'stakav l'fnei Paroi. He wasn't allowed to look at Paroi. That's why when Paroi says to Moshe, lo yisoisev rois panei, Moshe said, you're right. Kein dibarta, lo yisoisev rois panecha. Right? Yafeh dibarta, vizmanoi dibarta. I'm not allowed to look at you. Because you're a rasha, you have nothing left to look at. And then by Rabbi say in the Chasam Sofer, Parshas Vayishlach, Chasam Sofer says this exact pshat that we already saw in the Chasam Sofer HaChadosh, and he said in Parshas Balak, and that Rabbi Yonasan Eibeshitz says, and he says this exact pshat. Look on the bottom line on number 21. Kol zeh midivri, moiri v'Rabbi Hagoy ner yar. Everything I'm telling you I heard from my great Rebbe, the Haflar, Rabbi Pinchas Horowitz. By the way, Yaakov Avinu was very frightened to meet Esav. Because he didn't know whether Esav had Kedusha. I mean, he's encountering a rasha, he's thinking to himself, does Esav Taka have any Kedusha? So what did he do? He sent him money first. Because in his money, there was Kedusha in Yaakov's money. This way, if Esav didn't have Kedusha, now he would have Kedusha. And then Yaakov knew he would eventually take it back to himself by giving him a good look anyway, so he wouldn't lose out. That's what the Chasam Sofer points out. Comes our Chaim HaKadosh in this week's Parsha. Number 22. Says our Chaim HaKadosh number 22. Oid Yirtzal derech Oimram Yahiv be'enei v'katlei. Another Gemara in Shabbos. He looked at him and he killed him. Gam Amroi v'nasa gal shalat samai. Says Arachem, because what in the world are these mamari chazal hashkafa rishani yercha kamaseichel? They are so far from the human mind. Ki eich tia rias tzadik l'ra. How could the gaze of a tzaddik be for evil? Doesn't it say toiv ayin hu yivarech? A good-eyed person blesses. Yivarach. Says Arachem HaKadosh. But achar hahashkaf, after analyzing the situation, it doesn't say nasan ba'ena. It says yahiv einai, which means this idea that we're mentioning, that when the tzaddik looks at the rasha, his eye vacuums out, draws forth whatever kedusha is in the rasha. This is the pshat. L'asavlavai Hashem will come and shecht the malach hamaves. Shecht the malach hamaves. How do you shech the malach? What does it mean the Rebbe will shech the malach hamaves? What it means is Hashem will approach the malach hamaves. If the Rebbe gets any closer to malach hamaves, any vestige, any life force and vitality of the malach hamaves will immediately be drawn out to Rebbe Shem. The Rebbe Shem will remove from the malach hamaves his koyach hakedusha. Some say it means he'll take off the malach hamaves, the samach mem aleph lamed. He'll remove the aleph lamed, the name of God, and the meila, the malach hamaves will disintegrate. That's pshat in makas b'chayros. V'avarti b'eretz Mitzrayim. The Rebbe Shem will pass through Mitzrayim, and then all of a sudden all the b'chayrim will drop dead. Because the Rebbe Shem passes through Mitzrayim, the b'chayrim drop dead. That's right. That's the process.
Where should they fall apart?
I understand. It's always strife was doing this. What are we looking for?
That's the process. In other words, I'm going to explain. So far what we're learning is you got to watch out when you approach kedusha. You got to be careful, because the tzaddikim, they could take your kedusha, and you could be left without anything. That's what happened to Paroi. That's what happened. V'nasa gal shalat samai. Says the Arachem HaKadosh. That was makas b'chayros. It's interesting.
Yes.
Paroi says to Moshe Rabbeinu. Paroi says to Moshe Rabbeinu, "Lo oisif oidu ois panecha." I'm not going to look at you again. Look at the lashon that Paroi says. Lo hishamel chal toisav rois panai ki biyoyim roischa panai. Thomas, the day you see me, you're going to die. So Moshe says, "Good gesagt, yafe dibarta, v'zmane dibarta." And the way we explained it from the Chasam Sofer, from the Hafla, from Yonis and Eibishitz is that what Moshe was saying to Paroi is, there's nothing more to look at. I have no reason further to look at your face. But think carefully about what Paroi said. Paroi said, the day you see me, you're going to die. Was that true? When did Moshe ever see Paroi again? Taka, Moshe never saw Paroi again. So how could Moshe give the ringing endorsement to B'yoim? I understand Moshe said, I'm never going to see you again. But Paroi said more than that. Ki B'yoim ra'oischa fanai tamos. Well, comes none other than the Chasam Sofer again, in this week's Parsha, that the difference between Moshe Rabbeinu and a Paroi is Moshe Rabbeinu was the Kayach HaKedusha. What was his relationship to God? Panim al panim, face to face. Well, Paroi is the exact opposite. Why? Because Paroi is what is called Oiref, the neck. In other words, Paroi, his neck is to you. He's not panim al panim, his back to you. And that is merumas in the words loy oisif oid ra'ois panecha, which is Rashi Teivos oiref. Oid ra'ois panecha is oiref. Paroi is the tumah of oiref. Moshe is the kedusha of panim al panim. Says the Chasam Sofer. Another way to say oiref is Baal Pa'ar. Pa'ar are the oisios oiref. Taka, where is Moshe Rabbeinu buried? Mol Beis Pa'ar. Zelu Mazeh. Moshe is the kedusha of face to face. Pa'ar is the tumah of the oiref. That's what Moshe meant. You're right, Paroi. I will not see you until the day I die, when I'm buried mul Beis Pa'ar. You're Beis Pa'ar, and I'm buried right next to you. That will be the next time I see you. You're right. Kain dibarta, Yafa dibarta. The next time I see you is when I'll be buried mul Beis Pa'ar, to be mavato your tumah completely, be through my kedusha of panim al panim. Comes Rav Levi Yitzchak of Barditchev. If I'm not mistaken, the Hafla was influenced by Rav Levi Yitzchak of Barditchev. And he says an unbelievable thing. Rabbi Sai! It's almost Purim. It's Chodesh Shvat. In 6 weeks it could have been Purim. Purim Katan.
But you have two others.
Alright. Pretty close. In Megillas Esther, after Esther invites Haman to the Suda, Vayetze Haman Bayom Hahu Sameach B'Toiv Leiv. Haman left the party Toiv Leiv. Asked Rabbi Yitzchak of Barditchev, Toiv Leiv? Toiv Leiv. You know what Toiv Leiv means? Toiv Leiv always means B'Torah, B'Kedusha. Like by Boaz, he drank and his heart was good. The Gemara says he was learning Torah. So how could Haman ever reach the Madrega of Toiv Leiv? Toiv Leiv is the Madrega of Kedusha. Haman is going to reach a level of Kedusha? And this is going to answer possibly what you're asking before. We know that Esther invited Haman to the Suda. And the Gemara in Megillah asks, Ma'ara Esther Lazamin es Haman? Right? The Gemara gives many answers. And one of the answers the Gemara gives is the Gemara quotes a pasuk. The pasuk says, Imrav Soinacha Hachilehu Lechem. If your enemy is hungry, feed him bread. By doing so, you're pouring coals on his head. There's a concept, if you want to destroy somebody, give him bread. I remember one time, kill him with kindness. Remember, I once had trouble with a certain guy. In our shul, no talking. Not a little bit. Not when I'm not. There's no talking. There's one guy. He didn't appreciate that. He wasn't necessarily my best friend. Put it that way. So I didn't know what to do with him. So I invited him to a meal. Not only did he not accept, I never saw him again. I never saw him again. Well, that's what it says. And Rav Sainacha Hachileo Lechem. Hachileo. What's the concept? What's the idea? What's the idea? Says Rabbi Yitzchak of Barditchev, Haman was a Rasha. But in order to exist, you have to have some nitzutz of Kedusha. Well, Esther had a great plan. What she did was, she was going to invite him to her Suda. Her Suda is Suda Sadikim. And he would be influenced by Kedusha. But you see, the thing is, if you're such a Rasha, when you go to a Suda of a Tzadik, it pulls you away from the Tumah, but you're never going to be able to connect with the Kedusha. So basically, you remain unconnected to any life force, and then the Rasha has his downfall. In other words, a Rasha is rooted in Tumah. That's his source of vitality. So what Esther's plan was, she would invite him to Sudas Tzadikim, and that would pull him away from his source of vitality, which is his Tumah, but it would not bring him over to the side of Kedusha. So Esther does that. Vayitav liba, he felt like a tzaddik for a moment. It was like Boaz, Vayesh Vayitav liba. He was Nisaleh, but he was not Nisaleh enough to be connected to Kedusha. So in other words, when we go to a tzaddik and we connect with Kedusha, we connect with Hashem, we have enough Kedusha in us that at least we could connect to the Kedusha to give us a source and a source of vitality. But Taka, somebody who's Mamish Rasha, is so unconnected to Kedusha that his approach of approaching Kedusha is to his detriment. And that is the concept of what Esther did to invite Haman. Comes Yorachayim HaKadosh, and he says, a davar oyoim v'noira. Rabbi say, you must have davened very well to be zocheh to hear this. Maybe your alta bubba davened that in your life you should be able to hear a gem like this. Says Yorachayim HaKadosh in Parsha Shemais that the whole purpose of going down to Mitzrayim was to rescue and to recapture every spark of Kedusha. No, it's still going to be interesting. And he says like this. Says Yorachayim HaKadosh, on every level of Tumah, for that level of Tumah to exist, that level has to have a spark of Kedusha. So the first level of Tumah has Kedusha, and the second level of Tumah, and the third level of Tumah, and even the 49th level of Tumah has to have some Kedusha for there to be a 49th level of Tumah. The only way for us to be able to rescue and capture every last drop of Kedusha is to actually enter that level of Tumah and vacuum it out. So therefore, how long could we stay in Mitzrayim? How long do we need to stay in Mitzrayim? It was of the utmost importance that we remain in Mitzrayim at Rega Ha'achroin, to fall to the lowest level, to get that last speck of dust and that last speck of Kedusha that was trapped in the Tumah, and only then could we leave. Otherwise, we still have business to do.
Should we try and do that?
What? No, we shouldn't. Don't try this at home. That's the concept. Well, no, I'm not done. That's the concept why the Ribono Shel Olam made sure that we stay in Mitzrayim to get out every last speck of Kedusha. So ask our Machayim HaKadosh, then we should have Taka stayed there until we fell to the 50th level of Tumah to get the last drop. The answer is the 50th level of Tumah. We would never be able to come out. So Nebuch, what can we do? We had to leave with still a little bit business to take care of. But, you got to cut your losses. Says Or HaChaim HaKadosh, but that means we still have business to take care of. That means we still have one life force of Kedusha that was never removed. Where is it? In the 50th level of Tumah. Says Or HaChaim HaKadosh, it is possible to go to the 50th level of Tumah and to make it out alive. So why couldn't they in Mitzrayim? Says Or HaChaim HaKadosh, how do you draw forth Kedusha? Matzah min asmina. You need Kedusha to vacuum out the Kedusha. Well, in Mitzrayim, Klal Yisrael were maxed out. They were capped out. Why were they capped out? They didn't have the Torah yet. So they didn't have the Torah yet. They were not able to go to the 50th level of Tumah. They were only able to go to the 49th level of Tumah. But says Or HaChaim HaKadosh, Bi'achris Hayamim, Taka, the world will be on the 50th level of Tumah. I think we're almost there, if not long there already. And we will be able to take out the last vestige of Kedusha from the 50th level to how? Through the Torah Akdasha. The Torah allows a person to fall to the 50th level of Tumah and come back again. So while in Mitzrayim we fell to the point of no return, we would have fallen. Says Or HaChaim HaKadosh, Bizman Hazeh, there is no point of no return. And no matter how low a person falls, no matter how dark and dreary a person feels his spiritual life is, through the Torah a person could come out, even on the 50th level of Tumah. Let's just see this quickly inside. Says Or HaChaim HaKadosh, this is why the Ribono Shel Olam wanted to make sure Klal Yisrael fell until mamish the brink of no return. But he says 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 lines on the bottom. V'hovtachnu, we are guaranteed. Kila asad lava in the future. Yashbiya banu kelel yoin Torah's chaim. The Ribono Shel Olam will give us such a Torah. Shebeshar hachamishim, on the 50th level. This is a reference to the concept that la'asad lava, the Ribono Shel Olam will again reveal himself to us. Yishakeni min ashiko ispiu. Ribono Shel Olam will give us the Torah, even the 50th level of Torah. Moshe Rabbeinu had 49, but the Soidos HaTorah is considered the 50th level of Kedusha. And says the Or HaChaim HaKadosh, we are guaranteed, the Ribono Shel Olam will give us that Shar Nun. Uviprat Golos HaAchroin, especially in the last Golos, Anu Masigim Hadavar, we understand this. V'tam shenestaknu Yisrael b'Mitzrayim b'bir Shar Nun. The reason why we were in danger in Mitzrayim, letzad shaloi hayu b'nei Torah, because they didn't have the Torah yet. Mashe'ein kein doiros achroinim be'emtzos Torasam yasigu likanos l'shar hanun u'lahoitzi boile mipim. Nowadays, ba'achros hayomim, you can have somebody who fell to the lowest level of Tumah, and through the Torah will remove the vestiges of Kedusha that fallen to a point that in our past history was a point of no return. Says Or HaChaim HaKadosh, this is the secret of why Klal Yisrael had to fall up to the brink, and Baruch Hashem Ribono Shel Olam took us out, and we took out every last kernel of Kedusha, and Ritz Hashem, we should be Zoicha to take out the last drop. Amen.
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.